Last time we were talking about the prohibition for the Kohen to enter the Beis Hamikdash drunk. The Kohanim, when they served in the Beis Hamikdash, they were not allowed to serve in a state of intoxication. And we also mentioned that a halachic authority is not allowed to render a halachic decision while he is drunk. Now, we said that the reason for this is obvious, that it is very, very disrespectful to do anything when you're drunk. Drunk people are never as amusing as they think they are. Drunk people are generally very annoying. And the halacha is that you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to daven. You can't even daven in shul if you're drunk. The measure to determine how, if you're drunk, you could have a drink once in a while. The measure of determining whether or not you're drunk is, would you be able to stand in front of a king? And if you had a meeting with a king, we're talking about a king who is more of a monarch type, who, bring it up closer. A monarch who you'd be intimidated from. Would you be willing to stand in front of a monarch? Now, the truth of the matter is that the Israeli ambassador to one of the countries, I forgot what it was, once got loaded. He was drunk and he had to go meet it was one of these countries that has a monarchy. What is it, Denmark or Belgium or one of these places? And he forgot he came in to see the king, and he forgot the king's name, and he forgot the proper. He just walked in, hi king. I just came in, which doesn't cut it. Yeah, so that is the prohibition for the Kohanim to get drunk. Now, in Judaism, I'm sure you're aware that there is on the holiday of Purim, there is a custom to drink, and it's not a custom as much as it is brought down in Shulchan Aruch that chayav inish lebesume bepuria. A person has to get besume is to get loaded up on Purim. Now, in halacha, the halacha says openly that if you're going to get drunk and you're going to transgress halacha on Purim, then you should not get drunk and transgress halacha. On the other hand, there's an idea why we do it. So if you know that you're going to get drunk and you're going to be happy, we know what drunken behavior could lead to. But if you're going to get drunk and you're going to stand up on a table and put a lampshade on your head and dance around and pull down your, do something gross, don't do it. All right? Don't do it. Anything bordering on immorality, don't do. If you're going to get drunk, and as a result of being drunk, it gives you a certain sense of you'd like to study Torah, or you're in the mood to give tzedakah because you get drunk, that's the idea. The idea is to tap into, first of all, obviously we're happier when we're drunk. And when you drink, that's one of the ideas of drinking on Friday night. Friday night Shabbos, we're meant to relax. So you come to the Shabbos table Friday night, you've been working hard all week, and now there's a Torah command, relax. And it's difficult to turn it on and turn it off. You're sitting with your family, you have been with your family for a whole week, and you've been working hard all week, now relax. So part of the idea of making Kiddush, that you drink wine at Kiddush, so obviously, is the wine represents, it's an important drink. Every celebration in life, a wedding, a bris, any significant celebration involves wine. On the other hand, we also recognize the fact that wine has an effect on you. And so Friday night, you sit down, you make Kiddush, you knock back a cup of wine. It's going to put you into a more relaxed frame of mind. You could drink a little bit Friday night. Nothing wrong with drinking on Shabbos. There's nothing wrong with drinking if you drink in control. Purim, we go even beyond what we know. The mitzvah is to drink beyond what you normally drink. Now, if you're a college student, I don't think that mitzvah applies, but beyond what normal people drink when they're not in a fraternity setting, that is the determining factor for drinking. Now, there's a very interesting medrash. The medrash says that when Noach came out of the ark at the end of the flood, so it says that Noach planted a vineyard. You ever heard this idea? The Torah says he planted a vineyard. So it's a very, very interesting medrash. The medrash says, and midrashim are not always taken on the literal level. There's a certain level that midrashim speak in very obscure terms. There's a lesson that we're supposed to take from it. The medrash says that when Noach planted the vineyard, the Satan himself, accompanied Noach when they went to plant the vineyard. So the Medrash says that when they went to plant this vineyard, so Noach goes out there, and the Satan goes with him, Satan, and it says that he slaughtered when he went to the vineyard, he slaughtered a sheep and he drained the blood of the sheep into the vineyard. Then he took a lion, and he shechted the lion, and he drained the blood of the lion into the vineyard. Then he slaughtered a monkey, and he poured the blood of the monkey into the vineyard, and then he slaughtered a pig, and he poured the pig blood into the vineyard. That was mixed in with the soil that Noach planted the vineyard. He mixed in the blood of those animals. That's what the Medrash says. Anybody like to take a guess what you think the Medrash is trying to convey?
Because I heard it before.
Yeah, go ahead.
That it's the levels of getting drunk.
Good.
The first level, when you first drink lightly, you're like a sheep. You can be led to do
Right,
things nicely.
right.
The next level is a lion. You start getting,
Right,
I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. Then the monkey, you start doing stupid things. Then you get to the point of a pig where you throw up and you're a mess.
Exactly correct. Exactly. In other words, the Medrash is really telling you that there's nothing that's inherently good, nothing is inherently bad. The Medrash is telling you that there are certain things God gave us in the world. We could use that properly. They could be used properly. If you need a drink, sometimes you're nervous, you're going out on a shidduch, you're meeting a girl for the first time, you need to calm yourself down. I had a guy here once in the yeshiva, real good guy. He was a nice looking guy, he was a lawyer, and he was going out, he was already at the stage he wanted to get married, and every time he came back from the shidduch, the girls weren't interested in meeting him a second time. So I asked him, what's the problem? He said he spoke to the shadchan. Shadchan said the girls all say you're very, very, very nervous, very tight. So I said, listen, Ken, do me a favor. Next time you go out, why don't you take a bottle of Jack Daniels, knock down a couple of shots before you go, and then you go out and he says, okay, great idea. All right, so next time he goes out, he has a call, goes out, knocks down a couple of shots of Jack, and he goes out. He came back to the yeshiva, was in great. I said, how was it? He said, it was great. He was loose, he was himself, it was great. The next day I see him, he looks kind of bleak. I said, what's wrong? He said, well, I called the shop, she said, the girl doesn't want to meet me again. I said, why not? Well, she said she smelled the alcohol on my breath. Right? So I guess not all the plans work out. So the guy, okay, today he's happily married to a nice rich girl. At the end of the day, the Medrash is telling you, that everything that God gave us in the world could be used properly. You could use properly. Even cyanide could be used properly. Right? There are certain times that terrorist leaders need to be poisoned, so you could use cyanide properly. There's nothing wrong with it. There are certain times that cyanide is needed for whatever it is. Marijuana, they have medical. We're going to talk about marijuana in a second. There's medical uses for marijuana. There are non-medical uses for marijuana as well, and then there are the inappropriate uses of marijuana. So anything God gives us can be used properly. The Medrash is telling you sometimes you need to relax. Take a drink of wine, and you're a little more relaxed. You're calmed down. You go to the next level of drinking, so you call the lion stage. Right now you're all emboldened. The first level is you get to a party, you get to a big mix of people, and there's somebody you'd like to meet across the room, but you're nervous. So you have your first drink and it calms you down, but you still haven't got the guts to approach. So you have another drink. Now you're going to take on the world. Right? Now, the same thing, you need to go in and ask your boss for a raise. So you're very nervous about it. So you take a drink. Then you decide, I'm going to demand the raise. So you have another drink. Now you're a lion, and you go in and tell your boss what you really think, right? Then you maintain lion stage as you go home and boldly tell your wife that you're unemployed because your boss has just fired you. So you never know when you need to be bold. Okay, so you could drink it properly up to a level. If you keep drinking, then you get to the monkey stage where you think you're oh so clever and you make a total fool of yourself in public. You make a total jerk of yourself, and that's the monkey stage. That's the stage, obviously, that we're striving for. And then there's what's called the pig stage, where you are lying in the gutter and you are swimming in bodily fluids, and everybody looks past you, see that this guy's just, he's drunk as a skunk. There's another medrash, by the way. There's another medrash. There's a man who was an alcoholic. The man was always drunk, and his kids couldn't take it. It was embarrassing the entire family. So one day they're walking and they see a drunk in the gutter, and all the neighborhood kids are throwing stuff at him. They're laughing at the drunk, and the guy says, the son turns to his father and says, "Dad, that's what you look like when you get drunk." The father says, "Really?" And he goes over to the drunk and he bends down and he says something to him. He comes back to his kid and the kid says, "Dad, what did you say to him?" I said to him, "Where did you get such good stuff?" That's what I said. The medrash said, the kid said, "There's no hope for you." Right? So if a person, like anything else in life, it could be used or it could be abused. That's a rule. It could be used or it could be abused. There's almost nothing that is objectively good or bad. It depends how you use it. It could be used properly and it could be used inappropriately. Even opium could be used properly. You know that the Israeli soldiers that went into battle in this last battle, they were given opium lollipops. They're given flavored lollipops that have opium in them, so that if they're injured in the battlefront, they can immediately take the lollipop, which then gives them the recovery rate when a person suffers a physical trauma. So the recovery rate is stronger when you could reduce the pain. And they said that this saved lives of soldiers. So opium could be used at a battlefront to save lives. It depends how you use it. Nothing is inherently bad. Almost nothing, I should say. Nothing is inherently bad or inherently good. That's what it's telling you about. That's what it's telling you about the drinking. That's the idea of getting drunk. One of the reasons why we drink on Purim, by the way, there is a very deep reason to it, which I heard from Rabbi Gottlieb years ago. You see, in the course of a year, or let's say a person's in yeshiva for a couple of months, and sometimes we feel that we have grown in our religious commitment, we've grown in our values in life, we've grown spiritually. And how do you know? When do you get to test it? I want to know what I've really become. So one of the signs is that when a person then cuts loose, and you do it once a year, again, nowadays probably you'd have people do it more than once a year, but in a standard Torah society, people got drunk once a year on Purim, and you cut loose a little bit, and your subconscious is released, then you see how your behavior. So if you're the type of person, again, who all you're doing is you're telling off-color jokes and you're making a fool of yourself, then you haven't really grown as much as you think to. If you sit there at the Purim table crying because you wish you could give more tzedakah and you don't have enough money, that means that you've taken a step forward in your interpersonal relationships. So therefore, it becomes a way of being able to test ourselves. Now, the obvious question, the question people always ask is, what is the Torah view on marijuana in particular and drugs in general? What is the Torah view? So the Torah view, marijuana was not discussed in the classic literature from back in the Talmud, but Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was considered the halachic authority in the 20th century, so he has an interesting tshuva. A tshuva is a communication to somebody who asked him in writing what the halacha says about it. And Moshe writes him a letter back. And in this letter, he details 7 reasons why marijuana is forbidden according to halacha. Among the reasons are the prominent reasons. Number one, when you are under the influence of marijuana, you are not able to concentrate on Torah, davening, and mitzvahs the way you should. Even though a person who is in a state of whatever you call it nowadays, we used to call it being high. I don't know what you guys call it, toasted, whatever word you use, whatever the contemporary lingo is. Bottom line, it's all the same thing. And a person in that state sometimes then reads a book and feels that he's being profound and deep, and he's able to tap into the deepest recesses of philosophy, and in fact, he's just reading the same line over and over. So the idea that I think I could concentrate, and I feel very spiritual, and I'm connecting with God in my prayers. You're not connecting, you're connecting with yourself in your prayers, and then you leave shul and you munch out at the Shabbos table. So that's not being spiritual. You think you are, but you're not, and you can't even if you want to be, and therefore it is prohibited because it sidetracks you from, I'll get to you one second, because it sidetracks from involvement in Torah and mitzvahs, number one. Number two, Rabbi Feinstein says if your parents knew that you were doing it, they would be upset, and therefore there's the issue of honoring your parents. You're going against your parents' wishes, unless your parents were children of the 60s, in which case you're probably doing a mitzvah. But other than that, most parents are at the point, even if they are children of the 60s or the Vietnam War, or whatever it is, they are at the point where they'd rather their kids don't do the things that they were doing. And number three, when a person is under the influence of drugs, then his other desires and passions are heightened. And the person is therefore prohibited from putting himself in that state. Rabbi Feinstein has a few more reasons, but at the end of the day, it is prohibited. The fact that it is permissible to drink, so again, according to halacha, drinking could be a little bit more controlled, because you could drink and you get to a point where you're high without going overboard. Most people know where that point is. You see that in every society, they expect you to not drive drunk. Every society expects you not to drive drunk. And the argument that, well, I was so drunk I didn't know what I was doing, doesn't cut it. That argument gets you in jail. And therefore, you are expected at a certain point to be able to. So when you're drinking, the reality is that when you drink, you are able to maintain a certain point where you say, no more. Whereas when you smoke or you do drugs, often you don't even know what the effect of the drug is going to be. And it could be something very potent, and you didn't realize that 1 or 2 hits is going to put you over the top. And the next thing you know, you're out of control. You get a hold of some Maui Wowie, and you're and it doesn't take much. And therefore, the halacha is that it's prohibited. Somebody had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. In regards to the first reason of that it will stunt your spiritual growth or whatever it is. Now, in the context of okay, let's say I learned all day, whatever, let's say I prayed Mikvah, prayed Ma'ariv, now it's the end of the night, I had my spiritual growth. Obviously, you can always grow more, but saying somebody wants now to go to the beach, or like not women, but just
a separate beach,
just to enjoy the beach,
enjoy nature,
go to the forest or whatever, and now,
right,
put on some music,
right,
smokes whatever he smokes, and now it's the point over here is not spiritual. He already did the spiritual aspect. Then now is his own time, his own relaxing time.
Good.
So in regards to that,
it's an important question. The answer is it's still forbidden, because once it's forbidden, because everywhere we have a rule in halakha, we can't start making exceptions. Once it's forbidden, it's forbidden. Now this guy's going to do it. He's going to be spiritual in the forest, and he's going to be spiritual in the sorority, and he's going to be spiritual at the beach, and then he'll be at the mixed beach, and then he'll go to the other beach. You never know where each person, I'm going to be spiritual. I had guys said to me that at the end of the day in the yeshiva, they like to go down to the bar downtown to drink and discuss Torah and relax and discuss Torah in a bar. Well, I got a better idea. You could drink and discuss Torah in the base medrash also. There's something about the bar that's slightly different than the base medrash over here. The people in the bar, not all of them wear yarmulkes because they're females. So there is a slight difference. Now, number one. Number two, you're bringing up a very important point. You see, I'm going to tell you a shocker. I'm going to tell you a shocker right now. It's very interesting. Very interesting, because when you say what you call my time, downtime, it's relaxing time. Okay, now that's a very important point. Now pay attention carefully. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says that the world stands on three things. The world stands on Torah, Avoda, and Gemilus Chasadim. For those of you who are Sephardi, it's Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Right? But it's the same thing. Torah means Torah. Now, what the commentaries say, when the Mishnah says the world stands on three things, that means you, every human being, among other explanations, every human being is a miniature world. You are a world. And you, the world, were put into this world to do three things. Study Torah, learning Gemara, learning what we're learning right now, Chumash, doesn't matter which part of Torah. The mitzvah of Talmud Torah, of Torah study is number one. Avoda means the service of God, which in the purest sense means the performance of the mitzvahs and prayers, because then prayer is a form in place of the sacrifices, which is service of God. Shaking a lulav, wearing tzitzis, putting on tefillin, those are all part of the service of God. And Gemilut Chasadim means acts of kindness. Now, the first thing here that you see in these three things is that you are to develop, you have three relationships in life which you are meant to develop. There's a relationship between you and God. There's a relationship between you and your fellow man. There's a relationship between you and yourself. The relationship between you and God is avoda. You serve God. You're focused on God. The relationship between you and your fellow man is obviously Gemilut Chasadim. And the relationship between you and yourself is Torah. Because Torah is the only way that we have to offset the evil inclination. The evil inclination is a fire. He burns in us like a fire. And we need a fire in order to offset that fire, which is the Torah. The Torah is made of fire. As a matter of fact, the word Bereshis, if you ever look at the word Bereshis, the first word in the Torah, the two middle letters of the word Bereshis are Aleph Shin, which is Aish. The two middle letters of the word Bereshis, can you picture the word Bereshis? The two middle letters are Aish. If you take the two first letters and the two last letters, a Beis and a Reish, and a Yud and a Taf, they spell bris, a covenant. And therefore, the word Bereshis is a description of the book. It is the covenant of fire between God and the Jewish people. So the only way that you could possibly neutralize the fire of the evil inclination is by absorbing Torah into your system. That's why we spend so much time studying Torah, because men who do not study Torah will generally end up in prison. Therefore, we study Torah in order to neutralize the evil inclination, which is why women do not have that obligation of actual Torah study, because women are better than men. Women are the ones who keep men out of prison, and women are the ones who stop men from doing all sorts of averas, and that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a gift of a wife in order to stop us from getting into trouble. I'll get to you 1 second. Now, it's a bigger gift if she's a rich wife, but it's still a wife. It's still a wife any way you cut it. Now, at the end of the day, let's focus. I'll get to you 1 second. Those three things, Torah, Avodah, we have to be involved in 24 hours a day. Now, ideally, not even ideally, it's not such an ideal. It's not so difficult. You see, because if I'm a human being and I need to maintain balance and equilibrium to self, because sometimes people get religious and they go way too far too fast. And you get some sort of religious demon who, within a week and a half, he's already sprouted payas, only speaks Aramaic, and makes everybody around him crazy. That's not the goal. The goal is to serve God with joy, with energy, and I got to know who I am as a human being. As a human being, I need some what you call downtime. But my downtime is part of serving God. If I need to play some tennis, in order that I will feel better physically, in order that I have some time, something to look forward to in the course of the day, that becomes part of serving God. Now, it doesn't mean, serving, I don't mean serving because of tennis. I mean, it becomes serving God. Okay, 40 love for God. No, it doesn't mean, it means serving God means that that's part of my service. I need to play tennis. That doesn't mean that while you're playing tennis, everything you should do, if I ever see you do this, I'll take you out. Because, okay, my serve, this is for you, Hashem. Wham, that's not how we play it. You play tennis, you put on your shorts, and you go out there and you do exactly what you would have done. I don't care what you're doing. The bottom line is, what's your intent when you're going out there? Is your intent because I need this as part of my balance, as part of my life, because I'm a better human being as well? That becomes a part of your service. As a matter of fact, if you go to sleep at night, there are two ways to go to sleep. You could go to sleep by just, kind of that whole preparation thing, a shower, a newspaper, a big bag of corn chips, then get into bed and touch every single part of the bed, make sure, you got it all taken care of. That's one way to go to sleep. There's another way to go to sleep, do the exact same thing. But as you get into bed, you think to yourself, I need to get some sleep so I'll be able to daven better tomorrow morning, or when I get up at 2 a.m. for sichot. And I need to get my sleep to maintain my health, my mental health. Then your sleep becomes a way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means potentially every single thing you do in life, when you eat a salami sandwich, that could be a way of serving God. Everything when you go off into the forest, that could be a way of serving God. If you go into the forest and say, I'm now going to serve God with a reefer, that is not part of serving God, because God said, don't serve me that way. And the only reason we know that because Moshe Feinstein says that you're not allowed to serve God that way. Should you go into do you need downtime, what you call my own time? And by the way, it also depends on your spiritual level. You need to know, as a person, you need to know, if I'm going to think about this too much, it's also going to drive me nuts. If every time I go swimming, I think to myself, I need this for a healthy body, I need to do a mitzvah, even that could drive you crazy. And part of your avodah becomes, don't be so religious. Don't be such a tzaddik. There's a verse written by Shlomo Melech that says, Al tihi tzaddik harbe. Don't be such a big tzaddik. Don't be too big a tzaddik. There are a lot of big tzaddikim who become religious Mr. Magoo's. Remember Mr. Magoo, who's a cartoon character who couldn't see well. And everywhere he walks, he leaves this little old guy who could barely see, and everywhere he goes, he leaves a trail of disaster behind him. He doesn't even know what he's doing. Almost like a woman driver, right? He doesn't even know what's going on behind him. And you get a religious Mr. Magoo, who's the guy who's trying to be such a tzaddik, and he's left a trail of bodies behind him. He's the guy who's rushing to kiss the Sefer Torah and elbows 3 people on the way. But that's a religious Mr. Magoo. So, that's not your job. And if you're not at the level of being able to, some people go to davening, it looks like almost like a gymnastic session, You're like that, with shaking first of all, who you're shaking your fist at? Please, hey, what are you threatening over? Number one. Number two, who told her what's with the gymnastics? You should have a calorie counter, how much you burnt off during Shacharis. Who say, you're not supposed to walk out of shul with a sprained neck. It doesn't say that anywhere. You're supposed to daven, you're not supposed to hurt yourself. So if a person understands that anything he does, you could go off to the forest if you need to go off to the forest. But you can't take anything with you. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to say 2 things, but I know other people want to
Question. Limit it to questions. Limit it to questions.
Leave the comment out and I just
Yeah.
ask the question.
Go ahead.
We're allowed to drink alcohol on Purim if somebody smoke a joint? No, but you cannot smoke. That's exactly what we're saying. You cannot smoke a joint on Purim. You can drink alcohol, but you cannot smoke a joint on Purim. With all the difference is that it's both ways.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. Once something is inherently prohibited, you're not allowed to. It's the same as asking, could a guy, well, since we're supposed to have a good meal on Purim, could I eat pork on Purim? We're supposed to eat. It's basically the same thing. But I enjoy.
It was prohibited to drink alcohol on other days. You're only allowed to get drunk on.
Correct. Once they make it permissible, then it becomes permissible. That becomes permissible. If you're not allowed to torture animals in Judaism. But the Torah says you push a goat off the cliff on Yom Kippur, right? And so it's a horrible way to go. Horrible way to goat. And you push the goat off a cliff. I don't care. But isn't it prohibited? Yeah, it is, except when the Torah says it isn't. When the same Torah that says you're not supposed to, here the Torah says you are. So if the rabbis made a rabbinic decree, that means that there was a rabbinic court that passed the law. You have to read the Megillah on Purim, you have to give Matanos Levyonim on Purim, you have to do everything you do on Purim. One of the mitzvahs on Purim is to drink a little more than you normally drink. By the way, you could fulfill the mitzvah on Purim by going to sleep for a little while. If you sleep on Purim, then you also at that point do not know the difference between Orah Haman and Baruch Mordechai, and therefore you have fulfilled the mitzvah of being out of that state on Purim. So if you really, really want to be frum, so you can take a nap on Purim. Most people do both. You get good and drunk, and then you fall asleep. So you take care. It's all taken care of. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a friend who told me that he has a cousin in yeshiva, and once he went to see his cousin, and his cousin had this straw full of weed, and then they had a joint or two or three or whatever it was, and they sat down, both with Gemaras, and this guy isn't that from metal, he doesn't do anything. Sat down with Gemaras, he says he's never been able to learn like that. And as well as that, another similar thing is like Steve Jobs sort of like thanks LSD as part of his success in building Apple. So what's the halacha on that? If it's actually not as recreational, but you're sitting down, it's focusing you in the same way that, alcohol makes you want to give tzedakah, as you said, or whatever it is. What's the halacha?
Okay, I didn't say that you should give tzedakah when you're alcohol. No. I'm saying that it shows what you really want to do. Don't give tzedakah when you're drunk, because you're going to give a lot more than you should really be giving. Chances are you're going to write a check that's not covered. But don't give. It just shows what's internal. The answer to your question is that in Judaism, there's no such thing as the ends justifying the means justifying the ends. That means the person says, "Look, if I would have a cheeseburger right now, my Yetzer Hara would be taken care of. Then I could learn for 3 hours, and I'll give a lot at tzedakah." The answer is you don't do that, because you're not allowed. We do not make calculations in halacha. You're not going to do it? I can't help it. If a guy says to you, "Listen, if you don't permit this for me," guy comes in and he says to a rabbi, "If you don't find some sort of dispensation for me to do this, whatever the Aveira is, I'm going to throw away my Judaism altogether." The response to that is, well, so be it. So be it. We're not, it's not our Torah. It's not our Torah to tamper with. See, we were not given the Torah the Torah does not belong to us. It's not ours to compromise. You want to come to my house and you want me to compromise in my house, I can compromise anything I want. I can't compromise on his money, and I can't compromise on his furniture. It's not mine to compromise with. Only mine is there to compromise. I cannot, if you and I have an argument over money, I could reach a compromise with you. Do I think I want with my money? This is one of the big mistakes that was made by all of the reforming groups of Torah. The first thing the conservative movement did, for those of you who know the history, the first thing they did is they waived the prohibition of driving to shul on Shabbos. They said it's so important for Jews to get to shul on Shabbos, and if Jews live far away, then they're going to lose their connection to Judaism. They should drive to shul on Shabbos. Orthodox Judaism, Torah Judaism, doesn't say that. It's not my Torah. I can't go compromising my Torah. The Torah is God's Torah. God said don't drive on Shabbos. It's not up to you to make the compromises, no matter what benefits you're going to get out of it. This particularly applies in the world of trying to introduce Judaism to those who don't know. There are many people who will invite guests on Shabbos, knowing that the guests will drive to their house on Shabbos, so they could show them what Shabbos is. Otherwise, they'll never see Shabbos. It's not our Torah to compromise. It's not ours, and therefore, I have to do what God wants me to do. What about those people out there? God loves them more than I do. God wants them to find Judaism. They'll find it without me breaking God's Torah, which I've tried to introduce them to. Do you hear the irony over here? Let's desecrate Shabbos so we can teach these people how to keep Shabbos. When I first moved to Israel many, many years ago, so my wife was working at the Kotel. She was working with an outreach group, and her job was, I don't know if you ever met Jeff Seidel, if you know Jeff Seidel or Rabbi Meir Schuster, so they used to walk around by the Kotel, and when they saw Jews who were obviously backpackers or somebody not very connected to Judaism, they would approach them and invite them for a Shabbos meal. So they needed some female workers to work on the women's side of the mechitza at the Kotel to approach the young ladies. So my wife came home one day, and she said to me, now we were just married, she's 20 years old, 21 years old, she came home to me, and she said to me, what do I do if there are none of the men around, and I see a young man there, he's a backpacker, he's obviously looking around for something, am I allowed to approach him? She sensed that it's inherently inappropriate for a young lady to go and approach a male, especially in the 20th century. And so I spoke with the halachic authority, and he said to me, absolutely not. We are not God's policemen. I mean, it is not up to us to enforce, to help God. God doesn't need our help. All God wants us to do is what the halacha says. If this is not what the halacha says, if the halacha says you must not do it, we never think of what will the results be down the line. That's not our job. Our job is, what does God want me to do right now? God said not to do it. I can't help what will be down the line. I'll give you another example. Sometimes there's the issue of shaking hands with women, which many people have confronted this. So there is all halachic authorities in contemporary halacha, it is forbidden to shake a woman's hand when she extends a hand. You are not allowed to shake a woman's hand. There are certain dubious leniencies. I don't know where they come from, but there are people who say, well, you're allowed to shake her hand in order to save her embarrassment. Now, none of the leading poskim say that. But there are people who say, well, to save her embarrassment, you're allowed to. I don't understand. If your aunt who's not religious invited you over for dinner and she put out non-kosher food, you say, well, she'll be very insulted if I don't eat it, therefore I could eat the non-kosher food. You'll find some excuse. You'll tip over the plate. You feed it to the dog when she's not looking. You'll find some way to get out of it, which, by the way, is not a good idea. The best thing is to just say, I don't do that. You can blame yourself. You can make a joke out of it and say, well, I'm a bit of a religious extremist. I don't shake hands with women. Ironically, they'll respect you more for that. People try making excuses. I say, well, I actually got a cold. I can't. Because the next time she says, you won't have a cold. And now what are you going to do? Some people say when you walk around in the family, when you're back with your family, walk around with 2 drinks in your hand the whole evening. No one's going to stick out a hand, right? That doesn't make any sense. Because eventually they will find you when you're not carrying drinks in your hand. The best thing is simply to say, listen, I'm sorry, I don't shake hands with women. Why not? It's prohibited it's prohibited in our religion. Okay, so she'll put her hand back in her pocket and she'll find another man's hand to shake, right? And she'll respect you for it. As a matter of fact, there's a group of yeshiva guys that were in Switzerland. And they stopped. They were skiing, and they came down the slopes, and then they stopped. They went in to get a drink at one of the what do you call it, the little club they have, the bar, whatever it is. They halfway down. Okay, so they're sitting there, and these 4 yeshiva guys are sitting there, and a non-Jewish couple sits down at the table with them. The wife was German, the husband was French, and they're sitting there talking to these yeshiva guys. They get up to leave, and as they leave, the husband sticks out his hand. So the bacher shakes his hand, and the wife sticks out her hand. So the guy looks at her and goes, I'm sorry, I don't shake hands with women. She said, then why not? She said, well, because our religion prohibits it. She says, why is that? He says, well, first of all, physical contact could easily lead to other things. And second of all, a man who doesn't shake hands with other women doesn't make physical contact with other women, will have greater appreciation for his own wife. So she turns to her husband. She slaps him across the face as hard as she could. She says, Jacques, you should be more like the Jews. Right? So, we only do what everybody else is thinking. Everybody else knows that it's right. And so she'll be embarrassed. It's not my Torah. It's not my Torah. Even in Israel, we have this religious and secular, what they call conflict, which will never be bridged. It'll never be bridged. It will be when the secular turn religious. Because they want the religious to compromise. We can't compromise. It's not mine to compromise. You want me to compromise? I compromise on other things. I cannot compromise on something that is not mine. The Torah is not mine. But what about the effects? That's not what God doesn't say that anywhere in the Torah. Doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, make a calculation what the long-term effects are. Doesn't say that, what the long-term benefits. It says, this is the halacha, and don't do it. That's the idea. Okay? Unless they're extenuating area. Please.
I was going to ask you about, bringing you back to what you said about drugs. And you kind of gave quite a clear message of, this is God's Torah and this is what it says. So
right.
Do it. But I'm just thinking, I've just come from a shir relearning about the parasha, and it says if you're in war, you can take a woman, you can capture her, you can take her hair off, you can make her blah blah blah.
Good.
And then you can marry her.
Good.
So what I'm saying is, if it says that in the Torah, and I'm not obviously undermining Moshe Feinstein, whatever, but it's very recent.
Excellent question.
I suppose my question is this a peculiar halacha?
Yes. And the answer, excellent question. He's asking about this week's Parsha Kiseitze, which is where you find that a Jewish man who goes to war, if he sees a non-Jewish woman there and he takes a fancy to her, he's allowed to take her home, put her through the whole process of 1 month, shave her head, the whole thing, and then at the end of the time, if he still wants to marry her, he's allowed to marry her. So there, that's strange, to marry a shiksa, all of a sudden, of all things, you got nothing else to permit. Lashon hara is never allowed. Eating pork is never allowed. Once in a while, if you go to war and you find a good-looking shiksa, then you can take her. That just doesn't fit the pattern of the Torah. The answer is that if you look at the commentaries over there, the Torah is addressing the psychology And the same God that gave the Torah is the same God who created human beings, is the same God that says, up till this point you are capable, and when you've this point you're not capable. Who are you talking about? A man's going to war, he's tasted blood, he's a conqueror. People who go to war are in a state of domination. You are almost in an animal state. As a matter of fact, in this week's parsha, you'll see later on that one of the pieces is a very strange piece of equipment that Jewish people have to take to war with them. Do you know what that is? A shovel. A shovel. You know, it reminds me of the airplane. You go out to war, and when you leave your camp and you go to relieve yourself out in the forest, with or without your reefer, you go out to the forest, then you have to cover over what you've done in the forest. Oh, how considerate. That's so nice of you. You just slaughtered people, you killed people, but when you go out to the forest, you make sure be considerate of the next passenger, like it says in the airplane. Oh, it says, please be considerate, clean up after yourself, be considerate of the next passenger. I can guarantee you that when the United States invaded Afghanistan, they were doing their final equipment check. Okay, rocket launchers, check. Grenades, check. AK-47s, check. Shovel for the poopy, check. You know, we got it. You know, I guarantee you there are no shovels. There are no shovels. Maybe on a Swiss Army knife there's a spoon, but there are no shovels. Right? That's not a piece of equipment. Yet the Jewish people, when they went to war, they had a shovel with it. That's a strange piece of equipment, considering that we went to war, we conquered the people we killed. You know what the commentaries say? Remarkably enough, because when you go to war, you could easily turn into an animal. You turn into a savage. There are no controls. The Torah says, you know what? I want you to have a reminder every few hours. When you have to go out and relieve yourself, I want you to have a reminder you're a human being with human dignity. That's a way of maintaining a balance, maintaining focus on who you really are. Yet the same God who gave the Torah says there's going to be one thing that you are not expected to do, because no human being can be expected to overcome this temptation. Or let me rephrase that. It's understandable if a human being can't overcome this temptation. Not that nobody could. It's understandable if you can't. And therefore, if you're really in that state where you got to take this lady, so, okay, but first bring her home, let her shave her head, you come into the house every day, hi Baldy, how you doing? She doesn't put on any makeup, she doesn't put on for a whole month. If at the end of the month you're still desperate, then you can marry her. That's what the Torah is saying. Which means that if the Torah didn't give us that exception in any other area, see, that's the bad news. The bad news is you can never turn around and say this mitzvah is impossible. Because when the mitzvah is impossible, the Torah itself says, okay, here you have a leniency. And therefore, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, in his understanding of Torah, bringing proofs from his understanding of Torah, Moshe Feinstein says, this the Torah expects you not to be able to control. Therefore, the Torah said not to do that. Now, that's only as far as marijuana. See, once you get into the harder drugs, then you already get into even Rabbi Moshe Feinstein talks about marijuana, the health effects of marijuana. But once you get into the harder drugs, then it's a no-brainer, because anything that could cause imminent death is prohibited in Torah. Anything that imminent death would be prohibited. Long-term health effects is something else, but imminent death is certainly prohibited. So once you get the alcohol is only if you're really it could, but then again so could spaghetti if you choke on it. So anything could cause if you really go crazy with alcohol. So yes, you're right, alcohol could be dangerous. The Torah does not want you to get drunk to that state, and most people are able to not get to that state. If they have a danger that they will, they really shouldn't be drinking. If there is a concern that they will, they really shouldn't be drinking. But for most people, most people shouldn't get to that state. I'm not talking about your roommate in college. Most people should be able to control that state. Yeah, last question. Go ahead.
So it's a general question, but it applies to the marijuana too. In regards to, like, let's say cigarettes, they say that someone who started smoking cigarettes before they realized that it was bad, they said that, they can kind of continue because they didn't really know. So in regards to someone who already started smoking, forget about whether it's okay or not. He's already in that state of mind. All his friends, whatever.
Correct.
His world is, in a sense, surrounded by it. And just saying, I'm never going to do it again is not practical.
I didn't say not to never do it again. I didn't say he should say he's never going to. We're asking if it's prohibited or not. And again, think of the analogy to pork. The reason cigarettes are halakhically different because cigarettes do not fall under the same. Cigarettes are not mind-altering. Cigarettes are long-term, certainly not a good idea to smoke. It's certainly one should not smoke. Most people who smoke started when they were wise teenagers and are become physiologically addicted. Marijuana is not physiologically addicting, it's psychologically addicting. But a person who really wants to is able to avoid it. There are substitutes. You could use M&Ms. But there are a person has an obligation, and we recognize the difference between something which is mind altering and something which is not. Something which is mind altering is prohibited.
What's the practical approach that somebody who's already smoking?
Good. So that, please ask me tomorrow. First thing tomorrow, we'll talk about that. Okay.
In this class?
In this class. This class. Okay. See you tomorrow, guys.